We're here on behalf of the Risk Mitigation Department today. We'd like to discuss the situation of the Henderson family. They've been a client of our bank for the past 3 years. They took out a $500,000 loan from the bank in 2008, and to this point have remained current on their payments. Due to the recent financial downturn, however, they're no longer able to stay current on their payments. Because of this, we're forced to reevaluate the situation and our relationship with the Henderson family. First, to talk a little bit about the community we operate in, Gilbert, Arizona. It's one of the safest communities in the country, and as such, families are moving here in great number. It's a place where people want to come, buy homes, and raise a family. The average house in the community is reasonably priced right now because of the financial downturn, so people who may not have otherwise been able to afford homes in the area are moving in. The market is relatively stable in terms of the number of houses for sale. While there's plenty of houses out there to be bought and sold, you don't look around and see your neighbors turning over every few years. People come to Gilbert to stay. Also, the families there are relatively well off and able to afford the nice houses in the community. To look more specifically at the housing market in Gilbert, we see that over the past 5 years, the market has decreased 57%. Arizona as a whole experiences 51% of mortgages in negative equity, and Gilbert is no exception. The Henderson family is one example of this situation. Their house was worth approximately $500,000 when they bought it, and now it's down to approximately $300,000. When we gave the Henderson family a loan 3 years ago, we gave them a $500,000 mortgage. Mr. Henderson had a good paying job for the government. Due to the financial downturn, he lost his job with the government and now works in the private sector. However, when he took this job, he accepted a 20% decrease in his salary. Because of this, while he and his family have remained current to this point in their payments, in order for them to do so in the future, they would have to begin to dig into their savings and retirement accounts, something they're not willing to do. This forces them to reevaluate their financial situation, and as their bank, it forces us to do the same. We recognize that moving forward with the Henderson family will cause us to make some hard decisions. Most of these decisions will lead to a decrease in our initial income stream on a monthly basis. We realize, however, that this is a sacrifice we're willing to make in order to help our clients. We have to keep in mind, however, that we are a bank and not a charity, so all sacrifices made are made with an eye towards profitability in the long term. We also have to keep in mind that the decisions we make with the Henderson family sets a standard for the community and for our other clients. The Hendersons are just one of 8 first mortgages we hold in the Gilbert area, and as such, we have to realize that our interactions with them sets precedent for our other clients. Things that we need to consider in this situation when evaluating all the plans here are who are the primary interested parties involved, our stakeholders, if you will. We see 3 main groups. First is the Bank of Ingenuity ourselves, and as an extension of us, our stockholders and investors. Second is our clients, both the Henderson family specifically and our other clients more generally. Third is the community. The community being those people in the Gilbert area who do not currently bank with us, but have the potential to do so in the future. We have to consider what are our obligations and responsibilities to each of these groups of stakeholders. First, we see our primary responsibility as one that applies to all 3 groups, and that is to remain profitable. If we fail to remain profitable, we will, first of all, to our bank, no longer be able to stay in business, and we will not be able to give a positive return to our investors. To our clients, if we don't remain profitable and in business, we will not be able to fulfill our obligation to them. And third, to the community, if we don't stay in business, we can't offer them the banking services that they will look for us for. More specifically, to look just at our stockholders and our investors, we see the need to take their investments and be responsible stewards of their money, to act in a manner that would attempt to increase their profit the most with the least risk possible. Banking and investing is an inherently risky endeavor. However, we realize that we want to be responsible with their investments and not pursue unduly risky or inappropriate investments. To our clients, we see our responsibility to carry out the terms of our contract. With the Henderson family, we have a contracted mortgage. With Mr. Baker down the road, he has a checking account with us. To all of our clients, we agree to a contract with them, and it is our responsibility to fulfill those contracts to the best of our ability. To the community at large, we have a responsibility to ensure that we don't do anything to damage the financial market in the community. Granted, we understand that certain things will cause temporary decreases in the market for the expense of profitability, but looking at it as a whole, we want to ensure that our investments and our actions don't hurt the market. This is also true related to our clients. For example, we have the Henderson family with their mortgage. and we have 7 other first mortgages in the community. If we start foreclosing on other homes, the Henderson family's value of their home will decrease, damaging their investment. So it would be irresponsible for us as a bank to do things which damage either our clients' holdings or the community at large. When keeping all of these in mind, we ask ourselves 3 guiding questions. First, are we striving for the right intent? Second, are we pursuing the right action? And third, are we achieving the right result? To speak generally about each of these questions, what is the right action? The right action is the noble goal that we're striving towards. What is the right result? What is the right action? The right action is the path that takes us from the right intent to the right result. And then what is the right result? That would be the mirror image of that right intent. That would be, have we achieved the noble goal that we're striving for? Mirroring each of these 3 questions, you'll see a piece of the roadmap we provided at the bottom of our presentation. The question of, are we looking for the right intent? That's followed by our considerations. Are we pursuing the right action? That's followed by our options. And have we achieved the right result? That's followed by our evaluation. In this situation, we ask ourselves, what is the right intent? And we've determined that the right intent is to keep the Henderson family in their home at a reasonable price that they can afford, while maintaining a positive income stream for our bank and increasing profitability in the long run. When evaluating the intent, the action, and the results, we have to keep in mind the guiding legal principles. First is the fact that Arizona is a non-recourse mortgage state, which means that our clients, in this case the Henderson family, can simply walk away free and clear from the loan. This would be detrimental to both parties, as our bank would lose our investment and the Henderson family would lose their home. This is something we want to avoid at all costs, and it is our job as the Risk Mitigation Department to try and minimize that risk and present plans that give us a better option. The options we present today are also fully in compliance with all Arizona financial guidelines and the United States Legal Code regulating banking institutions. Now I'm going to turn it over to my associate Clif, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the different options we have.
When looking at the status quo, we see the Henderson family paying $3,000 per month on their current mortgage. They have $108,000 and currently invested in their home, while still having $972,000 to go. A few key takeaways from this scenario: we can see that the Henderson family has a significant financial investment in their home, while still having a substantial amount to go, obviously. But the key takeaway is that the status quo cannot continue. Ideally, we'd like the Henderson family to continue to pay on their mortgage, and we as the bank would maintain the same monthly income stream. However, they approached us as the bank saying they have retirement in mind, as well as their children's college fund, and they want us to work with them, and we're willing to do so. Thus, as the Risk Mitigation Department, we've come up with 6 different options that we'd like to present with you today. The first option being that of walkaway. Under the Arizona anti-deficiency laws, the Henderson family has the right to walk away from their mortgage, and if they do so, the bank would retain the home. When looking at the pros and cons of this option, we see that the bank does retain the capital that is their home. However, there are several consequences for both us as the bank and the Henderson family. For the Henderson family, first, they see a large drop in their credit score, which will prohibit further financial situations that they could endeavor in, such as a car loan or another house, because they'll obviously be without a home in this scenario. Also, we as the bank would retain several financial obligations, such as paying for realtors to sell the home and paying for the upkeep of a home that no one lives in. These are obviously things that we as the bank do not provide and would have to outsource to other businesses or create a new department, which would result in financial obligations. Next, we'll look at another option, that of the foreclosure. This is extremely similar to the walkaway option, except it is more unethical in our eyes because we as the bank would be forcing the Henderson family out of their home. Something we do not want to do because, as we mentioned earlier, it doesn't fulfill our responsibility to our client or our community. When looking at the pros and cons here, we see that the Henderson family loses all their payments to date, just like the walkaway option, while the bank does own the property. And once again, the bank assumes several financial obligations that they usually do not have to assume. The next option is that of a short sale. If the Henderson family sold their home for its current value, it would of course result in a large loss for us as the bank. And there are 2 paths, whether or not the house does sell or sells at a much lower value, which is more likely. But first, looking at if the house does sell at its current value of $300,000. We as the bank would receive a net loss of $150,000 because their home is in negative equity, and the Hendersons would lose all their payments to date, not having a home to live in at this point. Now, the other option is if the house does not sell for its current value, which is more common in our eyes because 25 of the properties in the Gilbert, Arizona area sold for 20 cents on the dollar to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and this would result in an even larger loss of $390,000 for the bank, also putting the Hendersons in a similar financial situation, living without a home and losing their $108,000 they previously invested in their home. Now, going back to the option slide, we can see that all of the options on the left side of our chart are ones that we do not want to pursue because they do not fill the right intent that David already outlined for us. With these options here on the left, in no way does the Henderson family stay in a home or any house to live in. They also lose all their current payments to date. We as the bank retain no source of monthly income, and we lose that income stream that we commonly rely on, and there's no source of profit share in the long run, or excuse me, profit for the bank in the long run. So we as the risk mitigation department pursued other options, and those will be the right side of our chart. Renegotiating the loan being first. There are two paths in which we can pursue with this option. First is decreasing the principal, and second is extending the term. When looking at the pros and cons of this one, we can see that if we decrease the principal, we would relieve the financial burden on the Hendersons. But this, of course, would come at a great cost that we as the bank could most likely not sustain. Because we would lose a lot of money by charging them less per month and not making any more money in the long run, we might not be able to sustain this while having 7 other first mortgages in the Gilbert, Arizona area, and this would decrease our portfolio and we would make a lot less money in the long run. Now, when looking to the other path of extending the term, this would also relieve the financial burden on the Hendersons, but this would come at a greater cost to them. By extending the term of their loan, they would have to pay pay their mortgage for almost 50 or 60 years, depending on to what point the term is extended. And if they do this, the reasons they came to us as the bank would not be fulfilled in the long term. Because they came and approached the bank saying, we're looking into our retirement and we're looking at paying for college for our children, those two things would simply be a wash, because while they're trying to put their children through college and are thinking about retirement, they're still going to be paying off the mortgage that was extended by almost twice its initial length. The next option is that of a rental. In this case, the bank would own the home and the Henderson family would rent from the bank at a rate competitive with other homes in the area of $1,800 per month. Under this option, it does seem good because the Henderson family at least gets to stay in the same house, but they do not own the home. In this case, the bank would. The Hendersons would pay a cheaper monthly rate, which would relieve the financial burden, and they do have the security of not having to move. However, the most important thing that we see in this situation is the long-term investment of the home. And this they would, of course, lose because the bank would retain the house as capital. The Henderson family bought the home in 2008 with the intention of either keeping it in the long run, possibly making a profit from it, or passing it down to their 2 children. But they, of course, did not do this because the bank would own the house. The final option is a rent-to-own option. It's important to note under this option that the Henderson family has the option to buy back into their mortgage at the time of their choosing. When they see that they're financially viable and that they are able to pay the $3,000 per month once again, they are allowed to do so as soon as they're ready. Under this option in particular, they would pay $2,100 per month. This rate would be 30% cheaper than their initial mortgage of $3,000 per month. Now notice that we took the extra step to give them a 10% greater deduction on their monthly payments than Mr. Henderson took in his income. He's currently losing 20% of his income per month, but we're going to step it down to 30 in order to relieve the financial burden on the Hendersons by an even greater degree. And we're doing this so they can make their monthly payments well within their means. Say an emergency comes up with their children, or they have to tap into their retirement money for another issue, we still want them to be able to make the payments on their home, which is why we chose the figure of $2,100 per month. Under this, 76% of what they pay would go towards their current mortgage or their previous mortgage, and the additional 24% would go to the bank as further income stream. Now, obviously, when looking at the con in this situation, the Hendersons would pay slightly more in the long run. However, it's important to note that this is not as much in the long run as the Henderson family would pay if we renegotiated the loan and extended the term. And the Henderson family would most importantly maintain their home, because they would pay this rental fee of $2,100 per month until they deem that they are ready, which we've analyzed in 5 and 10-year increments just for the sake of being easy. Say they chose to buy back in at 5 years. At that point, they would still owe $876,000 while having 24 years and 4 months left to go on their loan. And we as the bank would retain an additional profit of $30,000. Now, if they chose to do so at 10 years, the Hendersons would owe $780,000 while having 21 years, 8 months to go on their mortgage, and we as a bank would retain additional profit of $60,000. Now, ultimately stepping back and looking at all of our options considered, we need to analyze which one is the most financially responsible and the most ethical. When plotting all of our options on this graph, we ultimately conclude that the rent-to-own option is the most financially responsible and the most ethical option, for several reasons. First, financially. The Henderson family currently will still make monthly payments that go directly towards their mortgage. It would relieve their short-term burden, and in the long run, they would still retain that investment of their home that they initially sought after. We as the bank would maintain a current income stream, one that would benefit us in the short term, and in the long run, because we would make an additional profit from the money that we get when they rent. And also, it's the most ethical because it's an option that the Henderson family gets to stay in their home, and they get to maintain that long-term investment. You'll notice with the rental option, they get to live in their home, yes, but they get to live in the same house, but it's still not their home anymore because they don't own it, and they lose that financial security that they once had in the investment of their house. But with this rent-to-own option, with the re-entry, they can still buy back into their home, and they can do so at a time of their choosing when they believe they're financially ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have the privilege of banking in the Gilbert, Arizona community. It's a community where people want to come, they want to live, they want to raise their families here. They want to own homes here. The Henderson family is an example of one of these families. They bought into a house believing that this was where they wanted to raise their family. The market took a downturn, something they weren't expecting, and now they're struggling to make payments. As their bank, we have the opportunity to help them to achieve their goal. They want to own this home, they want to raise their family here, and we can help them do that. We also have to look out for our own interests as the bank. We have to remain profitable, we have to retain our income stream, and we have to look out for all of our clients. In this situation, we believe that the rent-to-own option, taking in the totality of the circumstances, is the best way for us to go. It helps us to achieve our right intent, which was, to take you back to that, the Henderson family owning their home for a price they can afford. The bank maintaining a positive income stream in the immediate while retaining high profitability in the long term. We believe the rent-to-own option is the correct, right action to take us to our right result. Because of this, we at the Risk Mitigation Department, after analyzing all the potential resolutions for this problem, recommend that to the Board of Directors of the bank. Thank you very much.
Would you speak to the bank earning an additional $306,000?
Yes, sir.
And over what period of time is that? Is that the potential that that's a negative, if it's over a very long period of time?
Well, sir, the way the plan works is the Henderson family would be paying this $2,100 per month for as long as they choose to. So since 76% of that $2,100 goes towards their initial mortgage payment, the maximum amount of time that they would be paying off is 51 years. So at the most, the Hendersons will be renting for 51 years, and at the end of that, they own the home. So assuming it takes them 51 years to pay off, they choose to rent for the entire period, that would net the bank an additional $306,000. Should the Henderson family choose to buy back into their mortgage at an earlier time due to an improvement in their financial circumstances, which is a part of the plan, the bank's additional profit would be less than that $306,000, but we would still achieve the full amount of our initial investment in the Henderson family, the $500,000 mortgage, plus the approximately $400,000 in interest payments that would have gone with that initial mortgage. So we're still earning back our entire initial investment, plus the $306,000 would be for the full term of 51 years.
So if they stayed for the 51 years, how much would they get paid in total?
You're saying if they rent for the full 51 years, they'll be paying approximately $1.2 million, which is their $500,000.
$300,000 house.
Well, it wasn't worth $300,000 when they were initially bought it, sir. So they took out a $500,000 mortgage. So we get that $500,000 back. Plus, the way the mortgage works, they would end up paying approximately an additional $400,000 in interest over the 30 to 35 years of the mortgage. So that brings us up to $900,000. And then assuming, as you said, they rent for the full 51 years, that's an additional $300,000, which brings us to approximately $1.2 million.
And that's, of course, assuming that the Hendersons do not buy back in. But since they approached us as the bank, and because we leave it up to them to determine when they want to buy back in, it's extremely beneficial to them to buy back into their initial investment and go back towards the initial mortgage at the time they're choosing. So that's why the next slide talks about if they choose in 5 years, their mortgage will be extended to 32 years total, which is only 2 extra years, while only paying a little more extra money of $30,000.
So I'm the editor of a newspaper in Gilbert, and I'm just about to write a story that says, while the bank is helping the family, the end result is the Henderson family is going to pay $1.2 million for a property that started out at 5 and went to 3. Is that really an ethical position for the bank?
Yes, sir, we believe it is. If you look at the housing market, over the past 5 years, it decreased 57%. So 2 years before the Hendersons bought their house, it was valued at $700,000. If we want to assume that they were going to take the entire 51 years to pay off their mortgage, traditionally, housing values increase. So their house could be worth well over $1.2 million in the future. Obviously, we can't determine that right now, but it's definitely a possibility. Additionally, part of working with the Henderson family in this situation is compromise. And by the nature of compromise, both sides win and both sides lose. So we see the Henderson family winning because they stay in their home for a more affordable rate, but the Henderson family loses because they pay more in the long run. The bank wins because we make more in the long run, but we lose because we're accepting a cut in the short term. In order for us to affect an effective compromise, both sides have to win, both sides have to lose. Yes, sir.
Before I can make a decision whether this is the right course of action or not for us, you didn't capture what the cost of ownership for us will be over those 51 years. There's going to be upkeep as the landlord. We're going to put in the paint, new AC units, all those things. So I would like to see at some time you capture those expenses.
Is there part of the rent-to-own plan, this will be stipulated in the contract, is the fact that since it's too early, and should the Henderson family carry this to term, they will own the house, they will be responsible for all of that. Had we pursued the rental plan, where it's just a basic rental, then that would fall upon us as a landlord. But since this is the rent-to-own, all those responsibilities would be on the Henderson family because we're assuming that this is their home, so they would treat it as such. They would want to upkeep it, and they wouldn't let it fall into disrepair, since they expect to own it in an indeterminate number of years, whether it be the 51 in the full term, or should they buy back in 5.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
If they exercise the option to buy back into the loan, would it be at market prices? How would that be?
It would be the initial mortgage that we have with them right now. So should they rent from us for 5 years and then choose to buy back in, 76% of their $2,100 a month for 5 years has gone towards that towards our original loan. So we gave them the $500,000 loan. $50,000 was a down payment, and then over the past 3 years, they've paid off a little over $100,000. So if they rent to own for the next 5 years and then choose to buy back in, 76% of the payments for the next 5 years would go to offset the additional approximately $350,000 they still have on the principal. So it would be back to the initial loan of $500,000 over 30 to 35 years.
The time for questions has expired.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.